Have you ever wondered why silence speaks louder than fury? Why your quiet departure can echo in the chambers of a man's psyche longer than any shouted goodbye? It is because when you walk away without noise, without drama, without explanation, you force him into the stark confrontation with what he has always tried to escape, his own shadow. In Jung's language, the shadow is everything he denies, everything he represses, everything he projects onto you so he doesn't have to bear it himself. And when your presence is gone, when your warmth no longer cushions the harshness of his inner world, all that darkness surges up to greet him like a stranger who has been waiting patiently at the edge of the firelight. A man who loses you quietly is not merely losing a woman. He is losing the mirror that protected him from his own reflection. He is stripped of the external stage on which he performed his ego. You see, while you stood beside him, your energy absorbed his insecurities, softened his inadequacies, and gave him a backdrop against which he could posture. But when you remove yourself without spectacle, you do not wound his pride in the way a fight would. Instead, you awaken something far more haunting: the void. Silence is the most merciless teacher, because it cannot be debated, cannot be reasoned with, cannot be blamed. He tells himself that you might come back, that you might still orbit around his gravity. But your absence is not orbit, it is departure. And in that departure, his shadow rises. The anger he feels is not at you, but at himself, though he cannot admit it. The emptiness he despises is not your doing, but the unhealed wound he has carried since boyhood. He begins to see fragments of himself in places he cannot bear: the child who was not enough, the lover who feared abandonment, the man who sought control because he could not tolerate vulnerability. And in the hush you leave behind, these fragments form a mosaic he can no longer look away from. Some women imagine that walking away must be loud to be powerful, but you already know the truth. Power lies not in proving your worth, but in refusing to bargain for it. Your quietness is not weakness, it is sovereignty. Because when you walk away quietly, you do not hand him an argument he can manipulate. You do not hand him tears he can dismiss. You do not hand him anger he can weaponize. You hand him nothing but the raw confrontation with his own soul. That is the moment he begins to wrestle with his shadow, whether he admits it or not. And here is the paradox. Your silence is more alive than any words you could have spoken. It reverberates through his days, haunting him in the ordinary moments. He picks up his phone to scroll, and the absence of your messages burns sharper than your words ever did. He steps into his home, and the air seems hollow, because the presence that once filled it now lingers as absence. This is what Jung understood. The unconscious erupts when external distractions vanish. Your departure is not a wound he can bandage with pride. It is a mirror he cannot shatter. You may wonder, will he change? Will the confrontation with his shadow birth transformation? That is not your burden to carry. Some men will retreat deeper into denial, seeking another woman to absorb their shadow, to play nursemaid to their ego. Others will drink or rage or bury themselves in work, all to avoid what your silence exposed. Yet there are some few, but real, who will let the mirror pierce them. They will face their shadow, wrestle with the archetypes of their own unconscious, and stumble toward growth. But whether he rises or collapses is irrelevant to you. The truth is that by walking away quietly, you have shifted the battlefield. You no longer fight his ego, you leave him to fight his shadow. This is the heart of feminine power: withdrawal that does not plead, silence that does not explain, dignity that does not collapse. You reclaim your energy not in defiance but in stillness. And paradoxically, that stillness shakes him more than fury ever could. Because fury he can meet with counterattack, but stillness renders him alone with himself. That is the punishment he never expected, and the gift he never deserved. And in this, you too are transformed. For when you walk away quietly, you are no longer a character trapped in the theater of his ego. You step out of the stage entirely, into the vastness of your own sovereignty. You stop being his mirror, and become your own light. You cease feeding his illusion, and start feeding your soul. This is individuation, the process Jung spoke of, the reclaiming of fragments, the union of shadow and self. Your quiet exit is not merely an ending for him, it is a beginning for you. The silence you leave behind begins to bend time. At first, he may not notice, convincing himself that he is fine, that your absence means nothing, but the days stretch longer, and the nights grow heavier, and the illusion cracks. Silence does this, it expands, it presses inward, it forces awareness. He finds himself staring into empty spaces, haunted not by your voice, but by the absence of it. This is how the shadow moves, not in thunder, but in whispers. The same whispers he once ignored in himself now return with vengeance, carrying the weight of all he avoided. He begins to remember the subtle moments your gaze, when he dismissed your feelings, the way your voice shifted when you felt unseen, the way you withdrew piece by piece before your final departure. These fragments resurface not as memories of you, but as indictments of him. The psyche, Jung said, always seeks wholeness, but wholeness requires recognition of what is broken. Your absence peels back the mask of his persona, the carefully crafted self-image he wears for the world. Without you, the mask no longer fits. It slips, and the man behind it is revealed smaller, more fragile, more wounded than he ever allowed himself to admit. Do you know how devastating it is for a man when the image he tried to project collapses under the weight of reality? He thought himself strong because you stood beside him, absorbing the storms he never confronted. He mistook your presence as proof of his adequacy. But when you walk away quietly, he is forced to see that his strength was borrowed, his control an illusion. His shadow whispers that he is not enough, and this time, there is no distraction to drown it out. And here lies the cruelty of the ego. It will twist your silence into accusations, into fantasies of betrayal. He may imagine you left for another, that you are testing him, that you wait for him still. He creates stories because he cannot bear the plain truth, that you chose to leave, and you chose it without noise. The ego thrives on conflict. It feeds on the push and pull of drama. But your quiet departure denies him this fuel. The more he tries to frame you as the villain in his inner script, the more his own shadow mocks him. Because deep down he knows, this pain is not about you, it is about him. And yet, do not mistake his suffering as a guarantee of his transformation. Pain alone does not awaken, it merely unsettles. Transformation comes only when a man stops running from his shadow and turns to face it. Few men have the courage. Many will cling tighter to denial, hunting for another woman to repeat the cycle, another mirror to absorb their shame. But some, those who cannot bear the hollowness anymore, will stumble towards self-examination. They will finally ask the questions they have long avoided. Why do I seek validation outside myself? Why do I fear vulnerability so much? Why do I sabotage intimacy the moment it threatens my ego? Whether he answers those questions or not is not your concern. That is his battle, not yours. And here is the paradox. The less you worry about his awakening, the more you awaken yourself. Because when you walk away quietly, you stop centering his growth and begin centering your own. You are no longer caught in the orbit of his ego. You are standing firmly in your own gravity. It is here that the true alchemy occurs. In silence, you reclaim pieces of yourself that were scattered in the effort to hold him together. You begin to hear your own thoughts unclouded by his projections. You feel your own emotions without apology, and in that stillness you see the truth. You were never dependent on his recognition. You were always whole, even when you forgot. This is why walking away quietly is not just an ending, it is a sacred act of individuation. The Stoics knew this too. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a man's worth is measured by the objects he pursues. When you walk away, you stop being an object of his pursuit, and he must confront whether his worth comes from conquest or from within. Epictetus said, "You are not disturbed by events, but by your opinion about events." His turmoil reveals his opinions, his attachments, his shadow. Your calm exit, in contrast, reveals your strength, because you are not disturbed by his reaction. You choose to detach. The woman who can leave quietly carries a wisdom that terrifies the unprepared man. She has discovered the power of non-attachment. She knows that love is not possession, that dignity is not negotiable, that silence is not emptiness but clarity. And in embodying this truth, she forces him to face the one relationship he has always neglected. the relationship with himself. The longer the silence lingers, the more it reshapes the architecture of his mind. At first, he seeks distraction, new conversations, louder rooms, temporary companions, but distraction is fragile, and in the quiet of the night, the shadow returns. It does not come with kindness, it comes with accusation. It reminds him of every word he swallowed, every fear he masked with bravado, every insecurity he disguised with dominance. And now, stripped of the audience you once provided, his ego cannot hold the stage alone. The theater collapses, and all that remains is the raw performance of his unhealed self. This is why your absence feels more alive than your presence ever did. While you were there, he could project his fears outward, letting you absorb the weight of them. But now, without you as a vessel, those projections rebound inward. He feels the sting of loneliness, not because you left, but because he never built the capacity to be whole without someone else carrying his emptiness. Jung knew this. The shadow is never destroyed, only denied or integrated. When you walk away quietly, you leave him no choice but to meet it. Whether he integrates or denies further is his choice, but the mirror has already been shattered. The quiet departure of a woman is not simply an ending, it is a confrontation with truth. Men who have lived their lives fleeing vulnerability are not prepared for it. Some will rage in silence, some will beg in prideful disguise, some will construct illusions to soften the blow, but every response is the same story. The ego scrambling to survive the shadow, and beneath all the noise of his mind lies the deeper wound, the boy who feared not being chosen, the adolescent who equated dominance with love, the man who built castles of control to cover foundations of sand. Your silence brings the flood, and though you may never see it, though he may never confess it, your absence rewrites him. It is not always redemption. It may harden him, it may soften him, it may finally break him open. But one thing is certain, he cannot remain unchanged, because silence, when paired with dignity, is the most unrelenting teacher. And you, what of you? In walking away quietly, you begin your own encounter with shadows. No woman departs without scars. You may still hear echoes of his voice in your mind, doubting your worth, questioning your choice. You may still feel the phantom weight of his need pressing against your spirit. But unlike him, you are not afraid of facing it. You understand that your silence is not avoidance, it is alignment. By leaving, you refuse to keep feeding the part of him that refuses to grow. By leaving, you reclaim your energy, your attention, your life. There is a power in this reclamation that no argument could have ever achieved. For arguments keep you tethered to the battlefield of his ego, but silence carries you beyond it. You do not win by conquering him. You win by choosing yourself. This is what individuation demands, the courage to leave behind roles, illusions, and cycles that keep you fragmented. And as you walk, you gather the pieces of yourself you once scattered across his moods, his needs, his shadow. Slowly, you feel whole again. This is also where Stoic wisdom walks beside you. Seneca taught that true strength lies in mastery over oneself, not mastery over others. When you walk away, you embody this truth. You no longer need to control him, convince him, or carry him. You need only govern yourself. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts, and your thoughts, no longer entangled in his shadow, begin to breathe again. You think of possibilities, of horizons, of your own becoming. The storm of his chaos no longer dictates the weather of your soul. Do you see how profound this is? In walking away quietly, you not only alter his reality, you elevate your own. His shadow becomes his burden. Your silence becomes your liberation. His ego fights for survival. Your spirit finds expansion. And in this divergence, a universal truth emerges. Not every man is meant to rise with you. Some are meant only to reveal where you have outgrown, where you must step beyond. This is the essence of your quiet power. To walk away without spectacle is to walk away with clarity. To walk away without explanation is to walk away with sovereignty. And in doing so, you remind both him and yourself that love without growth is bondage, and dignity without noise is freedom. With each passing week, the silence begins to wear at him like water carving stone. What he once dismissed as indifference gnaws at the edges of his pride. He may try to cloak it in bravado smiles on social media, casual words to friends, a sudden surge of activity to prove he is unbothered. Yet beneath the surface, the shadow keeps whispering louder each time. You were not enough. You could not hold her. You could not keep her light. This refrain is unbearable, for the masculine ego thrives on conquest, control, and possession. To lose quietly is to lose without a story to defend himself with, and that is the most shattering defeat of all. He finds himself caught in strange contradictions. The very silence he resents is the silence he craves to break. He imagines what it would feel like if you returned, not with tears or apologies, but simply with presence. Yet the fantasy does not soothe him. It deepens the ache, because if you return now, it would not erase the truth revealed in your absence that he depended on you not just for love, but for distraction from himself. Jung would call this projection. He cast his unmet needs onto you, expecting you to complete him, to rescue him from the emptiness. And when you refused to carry that weight any longer, when you walked away, he was left naked before the void. Some nights, he wrestles with the phantom of your energy. He replays conversations, searching for signs he ignored, moments he might have salvaged. But these replays are not about you. They are about him trying to rewrite the script where he was never abandoned. This is how the unconscious protects itself, inventing illusions to escape reality. Yet the more he rewrites, the more he feels the truth pressing back. You are gone, and no narrative can change that. And what of you? In your quiet departure, you begin to notice the subtle ways silence heals. At first it feels like a void, a space where his voice used to fill the air. But as the days pass, that void becomes fertile. You hear your own voice more clearly. You remember desires that had been muted. You rediscover passions, creativity, friendships, and even the gentle rhythm of solitude. Where once you were consumed by the storm of his ego, you now breathe in the calm of your own sovereignty. This is not the loneliness of abandonment. It is the solitude of rebirth. The Stoics remind us that suffering comes not from events themselves, but from the stories we tell about them. Epictetus would say, "It is not the silence that wounds you, but what you believe it means." At first, you may believe it means rejection, or loss, or punishment. But gradually you realize the silence is a gift. It is not emptiness, it is space. Space to rebuild, space to listen, space to become. Your story changes, and with it, your suffering dissolves. Meanwhile, his story remains entangled in resistance. He cannot bear to face the possibility that he was the architect of his own undoing. This is the tragedy of many men. They fear vulnerability more than they fear loss. To admit that your quiet walk away shattered him would be to admit that he depended on you. So instead, he hardens, pretends, performs, but the shadow does not allow escape forever. It waits, patient and merciless, surfacing in the cracks of his pride at night, in solitude, in the silence after laughter fades. And if he does choose to face it, it will be because your absence left him no other choice. For the shadow is like a wound left unattended. Ignored, it festers. Confronted, it heals. Some men will finally ask, why do I cling to power? Why do I equate control with love? Why do I run from the very intimacy I desire? These are the questions of individuation, the slow, painful birth of a man becoming whole. And though it was your departure that sparked this crisis, it is not your role to witness his becoming. That path belongs to him alone. You, on the other hand, do not wait for his transformation. You step into your own by leaving without spectacle. You refuse to let your worth hinge on his realization. You choose your dignity over his recognition, your clarity over his chaos. This choice is not just about him. It is about every part of you that once settled for less. Every part of you that once believed love must be earned by endurance. Walking away quietly is your declaration. Love is not sacrifice. and you will not bleed yourself dry for someone unwilling to face their shadow. This is the paradox of feminine power. The quieter you become, the louder your truth resounds. The less you chase, the more you choose. The more you withdraw, the more you return to yourself. And in that return, you discover that you were never leaving him. You were always walking back toward you. The silence that once seemed unbearable to him eventually becomes a mirror he cannot escape. It creeps into his mornings, where the bed feels larger than it should, colder than he imagined. It lingers in the evenings, when conversations with others feel shallow, lacking the depth that once came easily with you. And in that haunting stillness, he begins to sense what Jung described as the greatest confrontation a man can face, the battle with his own shadow, the reckoning with the unlived life inside him. Your quiet departure exposes him to the emptiness he carried all along. Without your presence, there is no longer anyone to absorb his chaos, no one to soothe his insecurities or mask his inadequacies. The mask slips, and what lies beneath is raw, unfiltered, often brutal. He sees the boy who feared rejection, the man who cloaked his fear in pride, the lover who confused control with devotion. And though he may try to distract himself through new relationships, louder distractions, endless pursuits, the truth follows him, persistent and unrelenting. For the unconscious never forgets. There is a cruelty in silence, but also a mercy. Cruelty because it strips away illusion. Mercy because it offers him the chance to change. Not all men will take it. Some will drown themselves in denial, seeking another woman to mirror back their strength, another distraction to silence their inner void. But for others, the pain of your absence becomes too sharp to ignore. It breaks them open. They begin to question the very foundation of their identity, realizing that what they called strength was merely avoidance, what they called love was often dependency, what they called control was fear in disguise. Yet the most important truth remains: his transformation, or lack of it, is not your burden. You were never meant to carry him through his shadows. That is the lie many women are taught, that nurturing must extend even to a man's refusal to grow. But when you walk away quietly, you refuse this lie. You return the shadow to its rightful owner. You no longer bleed to keep him whole. You no longer fracture yourself to hold his pieces together. In this act of detachment, you reclaim not only your freedom, but also your wholeness. And it is here, in your stillness, that you rediscover your own light. The silence you left behind for him becomes the silence you enter for yourself. A silence not of emptiness, but of clarity. You begin to hear the whispers of your soul that had long been drowned out by the noise of his ego. You realize how much energy was spent tending to wounds that were never yours. And in that realization, you feel a kind of relief, almost sacred. You are no longer tethered to the endless cycle of proving, explaining, negotiating. You simply exist in sovereignty, in dignity, in peace. The Stoics would tell you this is the essence of freedom. Marcus Aurelius wrote that happiness depends not on external validation, but on the quality of your own thoughts. And now, without his shadow clouding your sky, your thoughts breathe. You see possibilities again, dreams not filtered through compromise, desires not diluted by fear. You recognize that walking away was never abandonment of love. It was the birth of self-respect. For a man, your silence may remain a torment, a mirror he cannot shatter. For you, it becomes liberation. And in this contrast lies the deeper lesson. Relationships are not arenas where one must lose for the other to win. They are crucibles for growth. When growth ceases, when shadows remain unexamined, departure becomes necessary. And in choosing silence, you choose not bitterness but transcendence. Imagine this. He sits alone, replaying moments, wondering where he lost control. Yet the truth is, he never lost you, you simply returned to yourself. And that is a power he cannot touch, cannot diminish, cannot rewrite. Because sovereignty does not beg, it does not justify, it does not explain. It simply walks away, leaving behind the echo of dignity. So understand this. Your quiet departure is not the end of your story. It is the beginning. You are no longer defined by his recognition or his blindness. You are defined by your own becoming. You carry within you the wisdom of silence, the courage of detachment, the fire of rebirth, and as you walk forward, you embody a truth that terrifies and liberates at once. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.